Hello and welcome to No Rest for the Weekend, the show where we go behind the scenes and talk to the creators behind independent film and series. My name is Jason Godbey, and with me in the Rabbit Hole studio today is the creator and star of the series Blank My Life, Alex Speith.
Hi, thank you so much for having me.
Welcome, Alex. Thank you for coming. We always appreciate it when people schlep down to the studio here. I just wanted to, we'll start right off the bat and have you give us a little bit about your background and like how you came to acting and how the series came about.
Got you. Okay, so I came to acting pretty organically, as any child does. I went to go, well, not as any child does, but I went to go see a show, was really bitten by the bug, and then pretty much haven't looked back ever. You know, I went to theater school. I went to Carnegie Mellon in Pittsburgh, which is an amazing program. It was so great. And then I've been in New York for about, I'm on my 5th year now.
That's great. It's like you've graduated.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly. It's on to the finer things.
Yeah, it's one of those things that, people come here all the time, and, I always it's a tale of attrition, usually, in survival, if you can make it. So tell me, with Blank My Life, now this is a show that you created and you star in.
Yes.
So this is your baby.
Uh-huh.
How did that come about?
So it came about because, honestly, I was dropped by my acting agent, and at the time it was it was a year after I'd left school, and I felt really just, down and awful, and it felt like for the first time, it felt like I'd really failed, right? Because I'd kind of, gotten into this cool school. I'd been really loved and adored there and gotten a lot of like great roles, everything worked out. And then it felt like I was just like, oh God, I can't seem to hack it. The way I would describe it to non-actors, it sort of feels like you're getting fired when you get dropped. But I wanted to have something that I felt like I was in charge of. Lena Dunham, when she talks about the first stuff she started making, she calls them tiny compulsions. And I feel like that is exactly what the series started out as, was just being like, I have to make something. I have to make something. And then, invariably you do it enough, you get better filmically, you meet people who are better than you are, and it's gotten bigger and bigger. And it is my baby, but I think the real success, I feel, is that, so I'm going into the 3rd season, we're in post for that. And this was the first year that I felt like the members of my team owned it as much as I did, which is a huge accomplishment, and it means that you choose the right people and you are willing to give up enough power and control to allow others to have a stamp artistically, which is hard. It's not always easy.
And I've talked to other people about this, and having, especially if you're working with a director or working with different, because as where you are in your current position, when you can't be behind and in front of the camera at the same time, so you have to have that sort of circle of trust that you can build with people. Now, when you first came up here, did you think like everybody got an agent kind of thing? Did you realize that itself was a privileged position to be in when getting right out of school?
At the time, no, I didn't.
Right.
Because I went to a very, I don't want to say like, but it was like Carnegie Mellon is a pretty prestigious acting program. So most of the people I knew graduated with agents, and the people who didn't really talk about it because it's in the community we're in, it feels embarrassing, even though now I know that it is not at all. And I try to, they just had the CMU showcase, and I try to say all the time, I'm not represented. I want with every fiber of my being to be represented, not because I'm not good enough on my own, but because it would be helpful to have someone else pushing me forward. But it's by no means the be-all, end-all, and it doesn't mean you're not an actor if you're not represented. But No. At the time, I didn't realize it was a privileged position.
Right. And so that was kind of the rude awakening and the realization that you had. And I think it's good that, you were able to kind of take your fate in your own hands. And because I think the hardest part about being an actor, I know a lot of actors, is that you have to be chosen. Like you go out for auditions and you're always waiting on somebody else's project, and you're always like, you always have that fear of I'm not good enough, I'm not pretty enough, I'm not tall enough, whatever it is.
Totally.
And it's that in itself is a struggle to go through. But you were able to kind of take your anxiety and make art out of it.
Yeah, no, totally.
Yeah.
I mean, I was incredibly anxious when I first left school. I would say that I'm still pretty driven, sometimes to the point of being manic, honestly. But when I first graduated school, I was like a mess. Like, I couldn't. It felt like I was a person who had never acted before. And I'd been doing it at that time for I'd been a child, but still 8 years. And I just felt like I lost all my confidence. I was like barfing before auditions. I was so nervous. And I think by creating something, you allow yourself to have agency, which makes you remember, like whenever I go into a room now and like, God, like would love to be, like cast on something that I'm not just doing, but I feel like I'm there with the series. I'm there not just as a person looking to be chosen, but I'm there as someone who is an artist with their own opinion. I realize that I'm pretty good as far as what I know what I like, and I know the way that I want to present it. And I think that feels like power in itself too, is being like, oh, I have a more clear idea of my own taste.
Yeah, you're more of like a master of your own destiny. And, I think there's a great in the book The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. She talks about doing cures envy. And so if you're envious of a position, just kind of do what they do. And I had this realization years ago when I was doing my first like real movie on 16 millimeter. I was directing, and I was having a massive anxiety attack every day. I was shooting the day of the Oscar night. And we were like shooting all day, and I was exhausted. And I've always been kind of admirers of people who had won awards and stuff like that. And it immediately cured me of any of that notion. I was like, oh, I'm here doing what I want to do. I don't need awards. But this is the sweat and the pain that you have to go through in order to get there.
Totally.
So it sounds like this was not only just a career move for you, but, sort of a life-affirming...
yeah. I mean, like, the thing that I wish I could say is like, oh, it's been a huge career move for me, Jason. I have gone from 0 to 65, and that's not the truth. Like, my career, I wouldn't say has picked up due to the series, but it is me who's picked up due to the series. It's my confidence, it's myself, it's the belief that I am totally worthy, because I'm like, God, I do something so much harder all the time. It's so much easier to just act than it is to like call up bar after bar and be like, will you let us film here? It's so much easier than trying to SAG-AFTRA, like.
Yeah, well, I think the other thing too is that you give yourself a resume.
Yeah.
I've worked with actors before who were maybe novice producers who said, you know what, I've done a bunch of theater, but I have no reel. And, well, how do you get one? Well, nobody's going to hire you if you don't have a reel. So this, for you, it gives you a tremendous lot of work and different scenes and different situations that people can see you in and see you perform and say, oh, you know what, she might be good for this because she did this on her show. Totally.
But I think even more so, like, I mean, because I agree with you, right? But again, in my experience, I can't say like, oh yeah, someone saw my reel and I got cast on SVU. Like, that hasn't happened to me yet, although I pray it does. And I do have a reel because of my web series, Everyone in America.
Which is an achievement in itself.
Yes, but I would say the biggest thing is that you get your reps in. Like, I have not been hired to act on camera other than I think like a Groupon commercial I did one time. But other than that, I would have no on-camera experience if I didn't do this. And you can, of course, do classes and stuff, and I think it's fine to get reps in any way you want to do it. But it's also like, you're like, oh, okay, like, I can do this. I can be vulnerable on camera. I can do it. It's not that different. And you get that practice because you make the thing you do, you know?
I think that's key, too. Like, for me, I'm always shooting. I'm always trying to make my own stuff and always trying to get to a point where I feel more and more confident when I work on bigger and bigger projects. You know, the first time somebody handed me a check for 10 grand and said, we need you to make a 30-second or a 2-minute spot, it was like, oh Christ. You know, like, it was daunting, because you're like, I'm playing with somebody else's money right now. But, you know, because I had done what I did before, I had the confidence to be able to do that. Yeah. So maybe at the very least, it's just, you know, it's practice, it's giving yourself a reel, and then, you know, hopefully more opportunities open up from there. And I know that with a series 2, like, now you have a product. You have something that you can package that comes from you, and that you can, you know, try to take to a higher venue or get to a bigger places, which I understand that you're trying to do with the series right now.
I am trying with every bit of my power to get the episodes which are already out seen by as deep an audience as possible. Vast would also be nice, but I think the quality of the fan is more important for us to try to reach, because we do pretty long form content. It's like, you know, 15 to 20 minutes. And with all my power, I'm also trying to get season 3, which is about a girl being haunted by the ghost of her dead best friend in a spooky small town. We're trying to get that distributed and or sold.
I started watching the show, and I made myself...
Did you like it?
I went through season 1, and I was like, this is kind of because season 1 is very short episodes. Very webisode oriented. I was like, okay, this is an interesting collection of scenes. Then when I watched season 2, I was like, okay, now it's more cohesive, and now it feels more like a television show. Totally. And you could see the quality step up, you know, from one season to another. And, you know, that's the thing I've heard too. It's like, when you're pitching, if you're trying to pitch something that already exists, if you're working at a quality that's not the level they want to broadcast, they go, oh, this isn't the aesthetic that we want. Not even thinking about, oh, you know, if they had money, it would look better.
Yeah, of course.
Because the people that you're often pitching to, they just don't have that imagination. But when I saw season 2, I thought, yeah, this could be, like, somebody would put this on television. The quality is good. The acting went up. The writing went up. Like, everything has gotten better. I also think that with season 3, that, like, it will be even better in season 3. Also, the continuing storylines, I thought, were, like, you had more of a sense of, like, a serial narrative kind of thing. Totally. Which is, you know, that's what people are writing now in television. The days of sort of episodic TV, you don't really see that much anymore. It's very much, like, especially if you're in a streaming medium, like, people want that.
Linear.
Exactly. I want to binge watch this. I want to watch this. I want to go from episode 1 and that's what I do. I mean, I find myself, it's like, oh my God, I lost a Saturday because Jessica Jones came out, and you know, it's midnight and I've watched 8 episodes of it. And that's the kind of feeling you want. But yeah, I thought it was smart. It was funny.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
And it's, you know, it's got a quirkiness to it that makes it different from your average sort of single girl sitcom kind of thing.
I'm glad. I'm glad.
And I mean, imagine, are you writing every episode yourself?
So, yes, I write every episode myself. I think season 3, even more so than season 2, is fully linear. You know, I think that it really isn't vignette-ish at all, which I think even season 2 is in its way. There's sort of like pockets of life. But I write all the episodes myself. But this year I had an amazing collaborator named Kyle Wilson, and season 3 culminates in a musical, and he wrote the music for that. So I had no part of the music.
That's awesome. I'm getting Buffy flashbacks, and certain other comedies have been able to do that. It's a tough one to pull off. You were able to shoot that, and that's all in the can right now?
So, I mean, like, as far as, like, shooting it, honestly, like, but I feel like Jason So it's not that it is a musical episode, right? But the characters in town. So my character Susan is haunted by the ghost of my dead best friend. In life, my dead best friend was an actor, and now that he's haunting me, he still wants to be an actor. So he auditions for a community musical, and the last episode is the musical that they put on. So it's not like the whole thing was musical, but that section of it was. And we were so stressed out of it because we were going to record it all that day. Everybody was going to learn all the blocking and stuff, and we were going to, sing to track.
Right.
So we wouldn't record audio. We would just use the playback. And we were all very stressed. We thought it was going to take forever. We had no idea what we were up against. And, of course, it kind of went fine. It was like the days that we were kind of like, oh, this will be a walk in the park. Like we did one just very talky episode that took forever, it felt like, just because of the amount of coverage.
Yeah, people don't realize that, and I tell people that all the time. If you've got 20 pages of dialogue, it will take you forever.
Yeah.
And people don't realize that's because you've got to get the close-ups, you've got to get the over the shoulders, you got to get the two shot, the master shot, and then you're lucky that your actors aren't ready to drop dead by like hour 10 of going into that. From my own personal, when I'm doing stuff like that, especially if I'm working on a small budget, I shoot like Law and Order style. I do a lot of one-ers, and I try to get it, try to get all the setups like in one shot, and then you do like 5 takes and you're done.
Totally.
I mean, that's the thing about comedy too. It's like comedy is hard. Like it's hard to know when you're gelling at the right rate, and like, is this going to be funny? Like it's funny to me. It was funny when I read the script, but who knows if other people are going to get this?
Totally. I mean, I think the thing I feel comforted by is that honestly, I don't think this series is like so funny. I would say it's more like dark comedy. So the thing I can allow myself to be comforted by, because one of the things that I did feel like is I wanted season 3 to be more funny than I thought season 2 was. I think season 2 is really, really great, but I think there are very few moments where you're kind of like, oh, I'm going to laugh out loud at this. And I wanted season 3 to be more active in the world and in the comedy world. But I still think that it's not like a ha-ha comedy, which allows me to feel comforted when I'm like, I don't know if this is funny or not, but it's not like that funny a comedy, is it?
When you write, do you have an audience in mind? Like, who do you think this show is for? I
think this show, what I say is this show is for millennials, gay men looking at the Dear Evan Hansen open call, and of course the paranormal, but I think it's a show for many more. But when I think about writing, I mean, I didn't really think about my target audience this time. I just knew that I wanted to write a story about loss. I went through a breakup which really affected me the year before, and I kept trying to write all these movie scripts about getting broken up with and about people going through heartbreak and stuff, and they were all just trash, like so horrible. I think I have 3 screenplays that are all just like totally lame. I don't think I'm going to revisit them because they're like awful.
Well, you got them out of your system though.
Yeah,
which is a good thing. Sometimes you just need to do that. Sometimes you just need to get it down and be like, okay, that's out of my system.
Totally, but
I
it's
don't
not
have to touch it again.
But it's not even that it was. I felt very disappointed that I hadn't written the story about your heartbreaking. But then I don't know when. Because we're like submitting to IFP, New York Television Film, like all the like, I want my pilot to be produced kind of things. And in writing, like, why did you write this? I was like, oh my God, I didn't realize it, but this is the story about heartbreak. This is the story about losing the person you love. Even though I hadn't thought of it while I was writing it that way, it's exactly that.
So if you could go back in time, if Alex now could go back in time and give Alex 3 years ago advice, what would you tell yourself before embarking on the adventure?
You know what's funny is, like, I feel like with myself as an actor, I could go back and give myself so much advice, but because I knew nothing and I didn't have a community that knew much about filmmaking when I was coming up, I actually feel a lot of empathy with myself. And I feel like, you know, because I could say like, oh, don't work with people who are crazy, but I learned a lot from working with people who are crazy. And I could say like, work with people. The thing is, ultimately, I feel like I have now paired off the people who are crazy and I've paired off the people who don't care about the project. Like, I feel like everyone working on the project pretty much cares about it and is creatively crazy, but internally sane.
And you had to do this work to get there.
Yeah, but I feel like I couldn't, you know, the first 2 seasons we made on no budget, so the only people who will work on it are, okay, no, it doesn't, I mean, because also some of my very good friends worked on it, but it does mean that there must be a kind of mania to create, which I had and some of the collaborators had, and that can prove tricky. And then second season, there were people who didn't, I think, have enough, I don't know, skin in the game, and I felt like that was tricky as well.
You need people who are kind of have the same kind of crazy you have in order to latch onto something.
Exactly.
I think that's always a hard part, is finding the people who are as well. It's almost impossible to find people who are as into it as you are, but people who are willing to say, hey, I'm going to get something out of this and this is going to be valuable.
Yeah, I mean, and also I'm using the word crazy obviously very liberally right now. What I more mean to say is I think the sort of collaborators you really want are people who are able to put their whole heart into it but are still able to have boundaries, because I feel like the tricky part in collaboration, particularly where there's not enough, you know, cash, like no one's getting paid at scale at all. So I as a creator have to learn the things that I'm like, okay, like everything is fine, but this one thing has to get done, right? So it's very clear to everybody that like, oh, it's fine if you miss a deadline here and there, but what we need is this, you know? And I think...
You know, when I interviewed Jenny Paul just at the last episode that we did, and she said the same thing. Mm-hmm. She said it jokingly, but set boundaries was a big thing to tell yourself. With herself or with her team? With her when she started producing, she was like, set boundaries, and I think that applies to many situations.
Totally.
I have to wrap up, but thank you so much for coming on the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Went by very fast, and thank you out there once again for taking this trip down the rabbit hole. For more episodes of this show, you can go to the website btrp.nyc/podcast, and you can also find us on social media and let us know who you want us to talk to and what topics you want us to cover on future episodes. That's it for now. I'd like to thank my guest, Alex Speith, and we'll see you next time.